Welcome to a conversation with one of the sharpest minds in venture capital. Shane Parrish sits down with Bill Gurley, who spent years on Wall Street, built his career as a partner at Benchmark, backed companies like Uber and Grubhub through their hypergrowth years, and now serves on the board of the Santa Fe Institute, where he studies complexity and systems thinking. In this episode, Bill shares the mental models he returns to most often, what actually separates great founders, how he uses artificial intelligence day to day, and where he thinks the world is heading on open source, China, stablecoins, tokenization, payments, and venture capital itself. What follows is organized by theme, so you can move from the foundational ways he thinks all the way to his concrete predictions about the years ahead. Trajectory over starting place. Bill's first and most foundational idea is deceptively simple. The trajectory matters more than the starting place. Where something is heading matters far more than where it happens to be today. He illustrates it through the legendary investor Bill Miller, who beat the S&P 500 for 15 straight years while holding Amazon as his largest position. Miller's definition of value was refreshingly plain. An asset is a good value if it is underpriced relative to what you believe it will be worth in the future, nothing more. Seen that way, Amazon compounding at an unreasonable rate for a very long time wasn't crazy. If you believed in network effects and increasing returns, that growth was the entire thesis. Bill traces his own framework to a foundational reading list: Peter Lynch's One Up on Wall Street, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, all of Warren Buffett's letters, Ben Graham, and Howard Marks, and the through line he extracted from all of them is to weigh direction and slope over the static snapshot of today. Bedrock and bleeding edge. His central mental model for mastering any field is to hold two things at once: the deep bedrock history of your discipline and its current bleeding edge. That combination, he argues, is the rarest and the most differentiating. If you understand the really old stuff and you also truly understand the new edge, you become a power player in your field. He tells the story of a Benchmark partner, Alex Balkinski, who bought a charity dinner with Pixar's John Lasseter and was served a 10-course meal in which every single dish was tied to a classic cartoon Lasseter considered foundational to the art of animation. He points to Magnus Carlsen, the best chess player in the world, winning the trivia contest about the history of chess during a tournament break, and to Picasso, who was already a wildly accomplished realist painter by the age of 14. Mastery of the fundamentals sitting quietly beneath the later radical innovation. The practical version, for anyone building a career, is that if you interview for a marketing job and you are the one person in the room who knows the masters of the craft, you create instant contrast and signal a passion that cannot be faked. And there's a diagnostic in it too. If learning the history of your field feels tedious, that is real information, you are probably in the wrong lane. Obsessive learning. What sets founders apart? Bill then sharpens the point. The trait most common among truly great founders is not knowing history. It is an obsessive focus on the bleeding edge, because the disruptions that create the chance to build a company are always tied to something moving right now. He draws the parallel directly. When the mobile phone arrived, there were no engineers who had ever written a mobile app. A few people got onto that edge and figured it out, and artificial intelligence is the exact same situation today. This is also why incumbents so rarely make the leap. Diving into the new edge usually means admitting that a previous decision was wrong, and organizations resist that. Bill practices what he preaches, running 5 premium AI accounts simultaneously just so he doesn't miss anything happening at the frontier. Systems thinking and complex systems. His time on the board of the Santa Fe Institute, which studies complexity theory, has shaped essentially everything about how he thinks. He describes complex systems as multivariable, nonlinear systems, and the defining feature of such systems is that they can behave one way for a very long time and then completely flip when a single variable changes. The weather does this, stock markets do this, consumer behavior does this. The operating rule he draws from it is to never optimize for a single metric while assuming everything else holds still. You have to think about the whole system, because a change in one place can ripple into a second place, and then a third, sending the system somewhere far off the path you expected. Second and third order effects. That systems view leads naturally to a discipline of thinking in second and third order effects. His favorite illustration is self-driving cars. In a world where every car is autonomous, trust is easy, but in the messy real world, people quickly learn to jump in front of a self-driving car for fun because they know it will stop. He quotes the marketer Rory Sutherland on exactly this. You can just have fun with it. They're going to stop. You don't even have to look both ways anymore. And the second-order consequences of that are not good. Bill himself is already perfectly comfortable riding in the back seat with full self-driving and no longer feels any need to drive. The deeper lesson is to stay conscious of consequences that cascade beyond the obvious, and never to get too deterministic about a single metric or a single variable, because the interesting effects almost always show up one or two steps downstream. Storytelling, writing, and product instinct. Asked what separates the best founders, Bill names 3 traits: storytelling, product instinct, and sheer determination. On storytelling, he notes that the best founders are selling all the time, to employees, to executives, to investors, to customers, to partners, and that the raw material for that skill comes from reading. His own progression ran from personal development books to biographies to long-form narrative nonfiction in the style of Malcolm Gladwell, Michael Lewis, and John Carew, books that read like fiction even though they are true. He is a strong believer in writing as a thinking tool, invoking Amazon's 6-page memo principle. If you have to write something out so that it stands alone and is cogent, you think through more of the problem, tie up the loose ends, and end up with something far more coherent than any slide deck. Writing publicly, he adds, becomes a magnet in venture capital because founders come to you when they can see you already understand their world. On product instinct, the trait he says it took his whole career to fully appreciate. His point is humbling. It is nearly impossible to hire someone without it and then develop it in them. His exemplars are Toby Luckey of Shopify and Daniel Ek of Spotify. Listen to Toby for 5 minutes, he says, and you immediately understand why the world follows him. How Bill uses AI, and where models go next. Bill offers unusually practical advice on using AI, starting with a habit most people miss: front-load the prompt. People underestimate how much work a single prompt can carry. Instead of asking for a top 10 list and then ranking it yourself, ask the model to list, compare, and rank all in one shot. He is candid that he only learned this by degrees, at first pulling numbers from the model and adding them up by hand before realizing he could simply ask it to do that too. He uses different models for different jobs: ChatGPT for its project and memory structure, Gemini for restaurant research because it draws on Google reviews data and can tell you which 3 dishes people rave about and which they warn against, and Claude for coding. On where models go next, he raises the real questions honestly. We may be, in his phrase, painting in the corners, filling in the last of what is available on the internet, because training data has genuine limits. He cites Yann LeCun's argument that the next wave may not be language models at all, since there is a fundamental ceiling on what you can capture with language, which is part of why models still struggle with math. And he works through the AlphaGo debate. Yes, it invented a move no human had conceived, but it did so inside a fully searchable, constrained system, whereas the real world offers infinite paths. His nuanced bet is that vertical AI companies, the ones that deeply ingest domain-specific data and build workflows and data moats around it, will remain valuable even as the general models get extraordinarily good. Open source in China. One of the most striking parts of the conversation is Bill's view of open source in China. He describes roughly 10 Chinese open source models all learning from and training on one another, with weights shared and techniques published openly, and notes that a lot of Silicon Valley startups are quietly forking those models right now, something not on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, but happening broadly across the industry. He offers a farming metaphor. Imagine 2 farming societies, one where farmers simply trade goods at market and one where they are compelled to share their best practices. The second evolves far faster. That is the power of open sharing. It also creates an asymmetry, because if American and European models must comply with copyright rules while Chinese open source models do not, that gap can compound meaningfully over time. And on China itself, he takes a deliberately non-consensus position. Having spent 20 years engaged with the country, he finds the current vilification in both Washington and Silicon Valley hard to get behind. And he offers a line worth sitting with. The United States is 3, 4, 5% of the global population, So imagine what the other 95% thinks when they hear someone talk about American exceptionalism. Stablecoins, payments, and the duopoly. Bill is genuinely excited about stablecoins, which he defines simply as a cryptocurrency backed dollar for dollar by U.S. Treasuries, essentially the gold standard applied to a digital dollar. Because stablecoins run on crypto rails that are global, immediate, and cheap, they let you send $1 to anyone in the world in seconds for pennies. He contrasts this with a glaring gap in American infrastructure. The United States never built instant bank-to-bank transfer the way the United Kingdom did 20 years ago, or India with UPI, or Argentina and China with their own systems, where instant transfer quickly became 60 to 70% of all transactions. In the U.S., regulatory capture by the banks has kept the FedNow system going nowhere, and a wire still costs $25, requires forms, and may even require a verbal confirmation to your bank. He is equally pointed about Visa and Mastercard, which run two of the highest operating margins in business history at around 60%, built on a duopoly the banks themselves created and hold a stake in. There is, he says, zero fundamental reason a Visa or Mastercard transaction should cost 2 to 3%. It is entirely a function of regulatory capture and the absence of real competition. His proof point is China, where the moment the government mandated instant transfer, Alibaba and Tencent built Alipay and WeChat Pay almost overnight, now used for everything from street vendors to car dealerships with a single QR code scan. He expects Visa and Mastercard to be heavily threatened and thinks Washington's current momentum on crypto could accelerate the timeline. Tokenization and the broken IPO. Bill extends the theme to tokenization and the initial public offering, which he considers deeply broken. The IPO, as it works today, is insanely unfair to companies. Bankers pick the price and pick the shareholders, when a freshman computer science student could design something far better, an anonymous auction that simply matches supply and demand, the way every other market works. No one, he says flatly, would invent the IPO system from scratch. Direct listings use exactly that fairer auction mechanism, and Benchmark pushed hard for them, but Wall Street never embraced the idea and reverted to its controlled oligopoly. Tokenization, he argues, could genuinely disrupt the process by getting to fair share allocation first. He points to Palantir as the clearest case of retail investors pushing a stock to a valuation institutions simply cannot get their heads around. He is careful about the risks too. A tokenized private company, say a Stripe token, would fluctuate wildly, and companies like Stripe stay private precisely to control that volatility and protect their employees. Venture capital, megaburn, and circular deals. On his own industry, Bill starts from a framing he has used for decades. Wall Street is the buyer of what venture capitalists create, because the eventual exit is either an acquisition or an IPO. So if you understand what those buyers value, you can work backwards from day one, even when a company is just 2 people and a PowerPoint. He is amazed at the scale of today's build-out. 5 years ago, he would not have believed the largest technology companies would take their free cash flow from $50 to $100 billion a year down toward zero by spending it all on capital expenditure. He flags the danger of circular deals, where a cloud provider gives an AI lab $5 billion, and the lab spends it right back on cloud compute. So the growth metrics look explosive while the underlying activity has been inflated. He notes Dario Amede's counter that the growth is real in the sense that it would not otherwise exist, while conceding these deals push things further and faster and extend the runway before any correction. And he puts the numbers of megaburn in perspective. Amazon lost roughly $2 to $3 billion before it turned profitable. Uber burned around $15 billion, and today's AI companies will blow past both. Uber, he says, added a zero to megaburn, and AI has added another. Regulation, oligopoly, and trusted standards. A recurring thread is how regulation quietly shapes markets. Bill's warning is counterintuitive. If compliance becomes difficult, mundane, and expensive enough, it can convert what would have been a commodity market into an oligopoly by raising the bar against cheaper competitors like Chinese open-source models. And some incumbents know this and are actively lobbying for exactly that outcome. He illustrates the power of trusted standards with the ratings and proxy businesses. Moody's power, he observes, comes from being a trusted standard, not from any analytical edge. Even if an AI did the analysis better, the Moody's watermark still carries value. He finds the proxy advisor ISS an even cleaner target for disruption. It scores companies on governance using a black box, and if you want to understand your score, you hire ISS, so it gets paid on both sides. His example is the Tesla compensation package, structured so that Elon Musk only made money if the stock rose dramatically. A deal Bill says he would sign for every company he has ever worked with, which ISS nonetheless voted against, because its instincts are rooted in rule-following rather than shareholder value. Judgment. Will they do it no matter what? Bill closes on judgment. How to bet on a person. He borrows Jeff Bezos' one-question framework for angel investing. Is this person going to do this no matter what, come hell or high water? That level of determination, he says, is present in every great founder, and it rounds out his top 3 traits of storytelling, product instinct, and determination. He reflects, too, on Benchmark's own design, an equal partnership from day one, with no lead partner and no hierarchy, built by founders who had watched senior partners elsewhere take too much money and credit for too little work. That structure made it easy to recruit exceptional people and aligned everyone to want each other's companies to win, though its one real weakness was that with no chief executive, firm-wide initiatives were nearly impossible. And on what comes next for him? Having stepped back from venture when he felt there was no work left to do there, Bill says he wants to take the same skills that made him successful, the writing, the problem synthesis, the systems thinking, and point them at bigger, broader problems in society. It is, he says, work he would still choose to do even if we lived in a world where everyone worked for